Hi, Thaiss.
Welcome to the Brave Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Jena Rodriguez. Entrepreneurs are leading the way and creating a whole new level of possibility. Each week, listen in to hear how brilliant entrepreneurs share their brave secrets. Entrepreneurship is not the easy way. It is the brave way. Now let's get our brave on.
Hi, Thaiss. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here. So share with everybody, where are you located right now?
I am located in Toronto, Canada.
Got it.
And yeah.
Is it sunny and warm or cold up there?
It's sunny and warm. It's been, you know what? We actually had snow like 3-4 weeks ago still. And it was like, oh my gosh, is it ever going to come? And like all of a sudden I think it's almost 28 degrees Celsius here today, which is like
wow.
88 or so Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's warm.
Yeah. I'm so happy.
I know. Yeah, we're having a gorgeous day here in the LA, California. Of course, pretty much every day is like the same, but
beach weather every day.
Yeah, beach weather. But yeah, so good. I'm glad you have a gorgeous day outside, and we're all at home. So I always like to kind of get a feel for where you are and what the context of your location is, and all of that. So it's awesome to have you.
Thank you.
So share with us really quick so people get an idea of what is your work in the world.
So my work in the world is basically I run a personal development school. I've been in practice with clients for years and years now, and this sort of transitioned into an online platform because I started my practice. It filled up very quickly, always sort of trading my time and trying to see more people, serve more people, and eventually had a wait list for a year. And a great friend of mine came in and said, you should be putting stuff online. And so that's sort of what happened and turned into an online personal development school with over 30 different courses, 90 different webinars. We add 2 courses and 9 new webinars monthly, all kinds of stuff in there.
Wow. So, I love it. And the fact that it's called personal development school, I'm like, that's my kind of school.
Amazing.
That is definitely up my alley. Just, that's been a part of my life since I was a teenager with
wow.
Overcoming. And I know you mentioned that from addictions to traumas and things like that, helping people move through that. And I can relate. That was the path I took, was personal development. How do I understand myself and other people's behavior and all of that. And so do you have your own personal experience with that? What had you jump into that life as well?
So for me, it definitely started because of a very personal story. So I went through the typical sort of early childhood traumas that lead to these sorts of things. But by the time I was 14 years old, I had a knee surgery. I was an athlete. I went on to play Division I soccer, but I had a knee surgery and got addicted to my painkillers and struggled with addiction with opiates for about 7 years, almost daily use. I was definitely high functioning, but there were a lot of lows in there. And it wasn't really until I hit like a huge rock bottom and honestly was like pretty desperate just to change and do anything I could, that I started getting my hands on tools that really worked. So in the transition period from the time I started becoming an addict to the point where I actually started a real path to sobriety, I tried inpatient rehab, outpatient rehab, all sorts of different things. And like nothing was really working for me. And at a young age, I was like, I don't want to live like this. Like, I can't imagine living my life like this forever. And I even remember going to an NA meeting, which is like sort of similar to an AA meeting, and a person saying, getting like an award, like a little token, and saying, I'm 100 days sober, and today was another struggle. And I remember, I think I was like 18 years old or 19 years old. I'm thinking, there's no way I can live in this battle my whole life. Like this is too difficult. I can't battle something the whole life. And it wasn't until I really learned from that experience that the battle that I was facing was the battle between my conscious and subconscious mind, and not recognizing that like I had conscious desires, but my subconscious had other intentions, and it was trying to protect me from pain and subconsciously stored traumas and avoiding things and escaping. And when I realized that and got my hands on understanding the subconscious mind, it wasn't until then that I really started to transform addiction. And so that took me into going back to school, doing a master's degree after I got sober in transpersonal psychology, and over 13 different certifications to like really understand honestly spiritual principles
Yeah.
and principles of the subconscious mind, and really combine them with like these practical everyday tools and ground them into reality and practical application. And it was such a powerful journey for me. Like I thought at one point, I'm going to live like this my whole life, and to be free and for it to seem like a lifetime ago now has just been such a blessing that I really wanted to share that with as many people as possible and help people see that change needs to engage the subconscious mind in
Yes.
order for it to take place.
Nice.
So.
I love that. Yeah, me as well. I can just relate on so many levels. And I think it is, especially in our turbulent times right now in our world, is to understand what is really going on underneath the surface. I always call it moving from, moving above the line of your unconscious into your consciousness, and
Yes.
really making that shift. And then I say living consciously is not easy. The easy way, it's the brave way. So then here we are talking about a brave conversation, let alone just what you've come through and what you've owned. Like, I think you took a lot of personal ownership at that point,
Yes.
of really wanting to change. And for me, it feels like that tends to be kind of the first step, because otherwise then we're just victim of our circumstance and cannot find our way out.
Absolutely.
And so when I just like come back, I just want to go back to that moment where you're like, I gotta change. What was the first step? What do you remember? Because I know it's a lifetime, right? A lifetime ago. It's like, I don't even remember anymore. It's so faint. But like, I just want people to get that if they are in this space, especially right now, and they feel hopeless, or they feel like they can't do anything, or they feel limitation, what was that first step that you took?
So the first step that I took, I think, was honestly a step in vulnerability. I
Yeah.
think first with myself, I definitely hit a huge rock bottom, and like there wasn't going to be anything to bail me out of the situation. I was still young. And I think up until I was really like 18, 19, I sort of had my family there to sort of bail me out or enable to a certain degree without
Yes.
recognizing. And I think maybe they had some guilt for some of the things that I experienced, and so, showed up, but that was really, really enabling me as a person. I can't necessarily speak on behalf of all addicts, but I know for me, that was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a foundation to keep doing whatever I want from. And so when I really realized like my chances are out, I remember, drinking a bottle of red wine at like 11 a.m. and sitting on the bathroom floor and being like, God, if you are real, please like save me and help me. And there's that quote that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I actually had a friend, a mentor sort of come into my life. I was still in school part-time at the time, and it was through one of my psychology classes. And he came in, he started talking to me about, this is limited because the subconscious mind and all these different things, and introduced me to that. And also a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And I sort of started learning these two things through this person at the same time. And I had personally gone through so many times, like writing and journaling, like, why am I like this? Why can't I stop doing this? What's going on? Like, and as soon as I understood the subconscious and some of the principles through this mentor, it was like, oh, this is the war within myself. And as soon as that made sense, it was like, this is my ticket to freedom. And I think that this was sort of the shift that happened, where I almost became addicted to learning for a little while, because it was putting all these pieces together inside of me. And that began, me opening up, me sharing, me actually seeking help and being vulnerable and willing to receive, I think was a huge first step.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And, it's funny, I've hit many points I know you said you heard some of my story. I don't know if you've heard them all, but we have many, right? We have many stories. And, and my relationship and relatedness to what you're sharing is not, I didn't become the addict, but I was around the addict, and I've been around the addict. And there's some still in my family, there's some problems with, prescription drugs and, and whatever. And so I think we all find our addictions. I found it in, food became a vice, and then also addicted to learning. Like I was like obsessed with like, I got to figure this out. So what I heard myself say, in the moments that was just like rock bottoms, or just my moments of done, especially like moving out at 14, because I was in a 5-year household of domestic violence, addiction, and abuse, and all of that happening with my mother's boyfriend. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know. I just have to get myself out of the environment to even
Agreed.
find a way,
Yeah.
to move forward. And so 14, having to make that decision. But the words that would always come to me is, there's got to be a better way. There's
Yeah.
got to be a better way. And that
I
was
love
my prayer. That was my call. Like, show me something. Like, show me another option, and
Wow.
even if it's hard as hell, like, give me another option. And so whether it's, and even at 14, there was I call her an angel she showed up and said, you can move in with me. If I know what
Wow.
you're living with, if you need to stay here, I'll make that space for you. Well, that was an opening,
Wow.
so they show up in different ways. And I think, for anyone listening, it's like, if you feel like you're at that rock bottom, or you feel like you're just trapped in a world you don't want to be in anymore, in any way, whether it's in your mind or circumstantially around you,
Yes.
I think you just have to make the request and the prayer and the opening, just the small little window that says, I want something different.
Yes.
I want
I
something
absolutely
else.
agree.
This isn't it. Yeah. So, so I love that. And I was just a reader. Like, I started reading. I didn't necessarily, probably should have studied it. And I do feel like I have a psychology degree, but I don't. And I probably should have studied that in college, but went another route. But in the background of my entire life has been transformational work and personal development
Yes.
study and working. And yet it's almost like this last week, especially, I was like, oh, I think I just want to go back to unconscious. I think it would be easier. I really don't want to be aware of all this. I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. So do you ever feel that way?
I think that is something I can say I see with every single person is that
Yeah.
people, it starts off and it's a little bit of a bumpy ride at the beginning because,
Yep.
I think that one of the mechanisms that the subconscious does is it's trying to complete life experiences and it's trying to resolve problems and keep you safe. And so once we start getting into a space where there's like an emotional buildup, like I call it your emotional residue of past experiences, once we start being able to become more conscious and recognize and solve these problems and process things properly, then your subconscious loves to purge.
Yeah.
So it just likes to go, oh, and this thing and this thing and this thing. And I think sometimes even once you've sort of made that transition to becoming more consciously aware of your subconscious and some of your programs and patterns, if we get really busy for a season of life, or we get, there's all these responsibilities or there's all these challenges, that residue builds up again. And then our subconscious likes to purge and it brings us back through those really bumpy waters for a temporary period. But it's always, I think I've learned the hard way many times, it's always easier to just go directly into it than to ever try to avoid, because it just festers and it comes out in what I call your uglier ways, right? Like the ways that you didn't want it to come out, it sort of comes out in that way. So I think those moments are feedback to like hit the pause button and go,
Yes.
You know what? I need to carve out some space. I need to go inwards. I need to do some processing so I can feel like I'm back to a balanced state of mind again.
Yeah, it's definitely a space of recover,
Yes.
right? So I agree. I absolutely, even in the moments. I mean, I snapped a little this weekend. I just snapped a little, and my daughter got the brunt of it, and my 15-year-old, and in the moment of the snap, right? Like, I'm losing my marbles a little bit. I'm like, this is not my higher self. Just ignore everything I'm saying right now because it's not my higher self. And I'm in reaction and I'm about to cry. I mean, I'm like observer in the moment of the doing.
Oh man. But you know what? Like that definitely speaks to your level of consciousness, because it's like you have that conscious part of you in that awareness, even when you're being emotionally triggered, which is fantastic. And I just want to I've just finished writing and we're putting out a course this month on conscious parenting. And one of the huge foundational components is let your child know that you're a human. Absolutely. And if you try to put this space of, oh, I'm the superior, or I'm perfect, or I don't have flaws, or I don't show emotions, that's what your child thinks they should be and how they should grow up. And there's nothing more self-defeating. And so I also think it's really beautiful that you're able to have that conversation with your daughter and go, I'm not coming from my higher self right now. I'm about to, unload or whatever, but that's honest and authentic. And you're making space for emotions to be okay. And I think honestly, so many people could do better to show up that way. We're all going to be human beings, no matter how far along on our journey we are. And we need to take ourselves off the pedestal too, and not expect perfection And I think people in roles where, you know, you're teaching, you're sharing, you're helping others transform, I think it's really powerful for you to be able to share that with others.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And vice versa. I agree with you 100%. Even in the moment, I could feel the ego. I call it the subconscious ego, right? The protector.
100%.
You know, I feel the ego being like, oh, hide that from her, you know, like, don't be that, like, I'm supposed to be something else, you know, all the shoulds. I always say that the shoulds are your signal that your ego's talking. And even in the moment, I'm like, it's spinning, you know, like, I know what I'm up doing consciously, and at the same time can't stop it in the moment. And, you know, but I just purge the emotions, let it out. And then she's there. And then we, you know, and then we talk about it, and I hug her, and, you know, and just explain it, you know. And I think, whether it's a child or adult for that matter. And I know it's interesting that, and I'm just curious, your experience of this or your advice to people is special. I believe if you're watching this, you want a level of consciousness, or you wouldn't be here, right? You know, you and I are bringing that energy to this conversation, and yet I don't want to use the word responsibility but I don't know what else the word is. It's like I don't know what the word is. Maybe you
like
have
an accountability.
A what?
Accountability.
Maybe it's like this sense of, because I have the consciousness, like it's a responsibility,
a duty,
or like a part of that ownership to dive into it and to look at it, and to like, even if I can't see it in the moment, but to come back to it and like look 100%. At it and then own it. And, you know, I'm like constantly apologizing to my husband or my daughter because I'm having a human moment. And then, you know, and then I own it and apologize for that, you know, not because I was wrong in some way, but because of like, I could have done better. But it's like, but my ego wasn't allowing that to happen in the moment. Right. So what is it that, you know, the human part of you, like, what is it that you still struggle with, even in your, you know, evolution? What's still the challenge for you?
I love that you asked this question. I think this should be asked to everybody. I would definitely say that my biggest challenge is, I still work on boundaries every day, unless I'm conscious about them. It's something that like naturally is there. Part of like my programming as a person through childhood was like overgive, show up, be perfect, a lot of pressure, a lot of these sorts of standards. And I noticed that I have a tendency to like, you know, take too many things on the more unconscious I become. And then I'm like, you know, burnout sort of mode. And so that's something I'm improving, but I'm always working on. And I would say another big piece is sort of like this unconscious pressure I put on myself. And I found as a human being, I struggled with tremendous, like very intense wounds, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, was clinically diagnosed anxiety, depression in my late teens. And, you know, have been off antidepressants, all that stuff for years now, and will never go back. But you know, it was really easy to rewire at the subconscious level a lot of the like really painful things, like the traumas and the distrust and those things that were so sharp and so obvious. What I find is that as you sort of clean a lot of those things out, then you have like these secret things where sometimes it's like, oh, but I took too many things on because I was excited or inspired. Or, you know, and it's like, it's so hard to find those things sometimes.
My gosh, yes.
Like the patterns emerge from like a different angle sort of thing. So
100%.
Trying to become more aware of those now.
Oh, good. So you and I are alike. We're not alone. Oh my God. Yes. I'm so glad I met you. It is. It's true. So, you know, I mean, like this week is very, very pronounced for me because I just went through my own, like some of this awareness, and, you know, we have obviously some loud, you know, discord and chaos going on in our world at the time of this recording, at least in the US, and I know you're in Canada, but you're probably feeling some of it over there too. In addition to the pandemic, like in addition to that. And so this week became I am at a high level of stress. I've literally put on 5 pounds of stress. Wow. Like I got on the scale and I was like, what just happened? And my friend, my health coach, is like, you can't put on 5 pounds of fat in 7 days. She's like,
but it's probably like water weight, but like I think we retain a lot more stuff like that from stress. Cortisol triggers inflammatory responses.
Yes, exactly. So with that, I wanted to also get underneath what's the emotional part, adding to that unconscious and subconscious stress. And I I did not see this at the beginning until literally 2 days ago. So I was like in it for 7 days. And I'm still coming through it, and, you know, like just kind of like taking self-care seriously. And, one thing that I realized is I was consuming a lot of what's happening on social media and hearing everybody's, there's still a lot of hate, and there's a lot of judgment, and there's a lot of, let alone my need to transcend the fear of judgment. I know that's one that got triggered. And then my own judgment of self, and the way I have burdened myself with my own self betrayal. Like I have then experienced a lot of betrayal, air quotes, from others, but that's because it's a reflection of the betrayal that I gave myself, which was I let myself down. And you said the word perfection and hard on yourself and all that. And when I was young, that was my coping mechanism to get away from the chaos, was to go like try to.
What can I control?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other's humdinger was I was getting the trauma that was getting triggered was verbal abuse.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a thread off and on, not as heavy in the last, like 20 years, but definitely early on in my life, there was a thread of verbal abuse going on at different, and, I was bullied, but verbally.
Yeah. Wow.
I was, the domestic violence household, I was verbally abused. And I was like, wow, I didn't even see that as something still there to unwind, right?
Absolutely. And so when you were seeing all these things on social media and the way people speak and communicate, is that what sort of was the catalyst of the trigger?
Yeah. Wow. Like it wasn't even really necessarily directed at me, right? Thank God. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
But
it brings up, and the subconscious mind is an association making machine. So when we have, like, this happens all the time, when we have something that's outside of us and it's like, oh, the verbal abuse, you see it outside, it doesn't even matter if it's directly towards you. It's triggering the things that still need love and healing or reparenting within. And so, one thing that I always work on as a human being and has helped me profoundly is I'm always trying to look at anything painful that happens and basically recondition my subconscious mind to be able to go, okay, what is this showing me that needs love within myself? Like, what is this showing me that still needs healing, that still needs, and so I've sort of positioned it so that everything is happening for, not to. 100%. And so it's this natural instinct to sort of like pause and go inwards and take that response. And I don't know where it would be without that sometimes, because it's been, it just simplifies things a lot.
Well, and I think where we'd be is back to the addictions, back to the numbing, and back to the avoiding, and back to the trying to control everything, at least for me, right? And so I hope this is giving a message to people that, the bravest thing, I always say the bravest thing we can do is face ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. For me. Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Right. And so, so kind of moving through your journey and maybe the question I want to know or know an answer to is like, so here we are, right? We show up today and we're on this call, and what do you feel like is the next bravest thing for you coming forward?
I think the next, so can I touch on one thing really quickly that I think is super important, just on some of the things you were just saying? I was hoping it was in the same direction. Something that we share inside the school is like, when we talk about addictions or like trying to not face yourself, not look at those things, is whatever we do to escape, whether it's like some people are, binge watching television, some people are on social media 24/7, some people are like, whatever it is, you mentioned it yourself, and it's so correct. Like, everybody has different types of addictions, obviously across the spectrum and in different forms, but whatever that is, it's like, the addiction isn't the issue. Like we say, the issue isn't the issue. It's not the bottle of wine. It's not the television. It's not, none of those things are saying, oh, come here and drink me or turn me on right now and watch. Like, there's no relationship there. It's the fact that we have these stored subconscious unresolved traumas that are bubbling beneath the surface and trying to find their way out. And we don't like that. And so we try to repress and hide. And it's, all of those things are feedback mechanisms to let us know that something is sort of out of alignment in that area specifically. So I just wanted to touch on that. But I think in terms of like the next bravest thing that we're doing, so I mean, just something we're doing in expanding business wise is we have the school, we launched last October online. I've been teaching courses in person for a long time, and it's been doing very well. We have close to 1,200 or so active students. and we're launching like a personal development school for kids. So for
Yay.
me, that's
Yes.
yeah, for me, it's sort of a new area, like new territory, things like
Oh,
that.
girl.
Yep. And so we're sort of opening that up. And I think during this whole journey, again, like the big lesson that I'm always working on as a human being is the lesson of boundaries and not taking on too much and all these sorts of things.
Right.
So as I'm sort of going through this journey personally, I'm like, okay, I have to be so clear. It's easy to be like, this is inspiring and exciting and take all these things on, but I'm trying to be really clear within myself. Like, okay, what are my boundaries? Saying no, even if I feel excited, even if I feel inspired, and just sort of like really carving out that space. And it might
Absolutely.
sound like a surface thing to some people, but for me, it's been such an important journey and something that I started at like a -100 at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's still the daily the daily climb and checking in and showing up there.
Oh,
So
I'm excited. I'm like, man, I want to play with you in that space. Like, it is a thing that goes on. I'm like, how can we impact the youth? I mean, I got one at home. I
yeah,
got one.
yeah.
I can hopefully impact one. And she's like, can't you just be a normal parent? I'm like, oh, you mean
Good
the
luck
unconscious
finding one of
kind?
those. Yeah.
You mean the unconscious kind? Okay, got it. Yeah, some days I'd like to be.
Oh, I see the
You know,
unconscious. Yeah.
turn it off. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny, but I commend you on that. Like, I think that is such a missing piece in our
Yeah,
world.
big time. Yeah.
um and I know it starts with conscious adults
Yeah,
in order to
absolutely.
have those conversations, because they're still in the victimship of their phase of consciousness, meaning because they've been dependent on
Yes.
others, you know.
Yes.
So how do they learn the coping mechanisms and the trust to look within? I mean, that's been my journey. My hardest journey is just trusting myself and constantly going, I'm going to live through this if I look.
Yeah.
If I take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I
Wow.
think we can become so afraid. Like I think so many of our the relationship we built, because how, our generation was conditioned and socialized. It's like, oh, emotions are bad,
Yeah.
children should be seen and not heard, and
Right.
so it's like, oh,
Conditions.
we don't want to feel that stuff. We're too busy repressing it. And so when
Right.
we have to sort of come into harmony with like those deeper parts of ourselves that we've been ignoring and hiding, that's the only way to then pass that message along to the next
Yeah.
generation, is to lead by example. And
Yes.
so, and I think kids, do you notice that kids and your daughter's generation, for example, and even younger, but do you notice that they tend to be a little bit more, maybe it's just through experience, like juxtaposing where we're at, but they just seem to be so emotionally open, like so
Well, they
naturally
don't have to build
flowing.
them.
And yep, exactly.
We haven't built an entire concrete foundation on top of them.
Yes.
Like, you know how it's almost like we just get a layer of cement like every year.
Yes.
So I'm quite older than her, so I've got layers of cement on top of me that I'm jackhammering. But I do see that. I absolutely see that, and that's why I think it's a sponge. I think it's an opportunity. Like, now is the time
Yeah.
To shift the generations that are coming forward, and to, I mean, something I'm seeing in the divisiveness of our world right now, and our country for sure, and the people within it, is that somewhere we have to break the cycle of the stories that we keep perpetuating,
Oh,
and even, I mean, my own, and everyone else. Like, if we don't break the cycle, and that was one of the things I heard myself say as a young adult or teenager. I don't even remember what the date was, but it was very early on that I said, I'm not living this way. This
yeah,
is
good
not
for
going to
you.
be my life. This is not what
Good
my
for you.
child's going to go through. And so whatever, I kept looking at, what do I have to do for me to not have that cycle? And I'm clear there's patterns I still have to break,
Oh yeah, all
right?
all humans. Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
Sign me up for the course, right? And yet I think it's such a bigger conversation we've got to spread, is that
Absolutely.
it starts with the personal ownership, called, it's not the circumstance out there, it's not the events happening that's going,
It's
we
my
individuals
relationship to
perpetuate.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so funny. Like one of the huge themes that was so important to me on my journey is, and I'll share this from a personal experience. So I
Please.
started doing this like subconscious work, started noticing like huge results in terms of reprogramming and like releasing traumas and forgiving and letting go of things. And I actually got off painkillers and was sober for in and out for 6 months, but I couldn't stop drinking. Like it's still, I would come home and I would be sober all day, which was like a huge win for me at this time in my life.
Right.
And I would come home, and I was living in Florida at the time and going to school down there. And I would finish my day and I would come home, and I couldn't not go to the gas station across the street and buy wine. And as soon as I opened that wine, I couldn't not finish the entire bottle of wine, right?
Wow.
Like as soon as it was open. And then I would notice this pattern where it was like, if I was beating myself up and I was like, why did I do that? Why can't I stop drinking? What's wrong with me? As soon as I was doing that, you know, half an hour later, I'm walking back across the street, getting a second bottle of wine. And it's like a Tuesday night, you know, like it's, and there I am, like getting up for work and school the next day and like really hungover because I drank 2 bottles of wine by myself on a two. And I noticed this massive thing that really took place for me that was that, and I think I read it in like a Wayne Dyer book or something at the time, that he said, you can't be against the problem. We have to be for a solution. We can't be against war. We have to be for peace. And I realized like every time I would beat myself up, I would feel guilt. I would feel, you know, the self-criticism, and I would feel shame. And then I would need to escape more from the things I was feeling. And I was perpetuating this cycle. And when I was able to tune in and be like, okay, you know what? I've come so far. Like I've gotten off painkillers, something I never thought I would do. I'm doing okay. This is a transitionary period. I'm getting, and as soon as I would start building myself up, I wasn't back at the gas station. And I did get to these points where then I was okay, you know, a glass of wine, and then stopped drinking, and then had this full period of you know, extreme sobriety, and you know, did a lot of subconscious reprogramming. Now I can sit down and have a glass of wine and it doesn't make a difference. Like there's no addictive relationship. But and I'm not necessarily saying that that's the right thing for everybody. Some people have to really maintain
Like
abstinence,
just not do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I was lucky enough to get my hands on really, really solid tools that create transformation. And I think that principle really applies to the collective right now. And whether it's COVID, whether it's, you know, all the riots, all these different things that are taking place, you know, we can't be against a problem. We have to be for a solution. And I think a lot of people feel helpless and feel, you know, oh my gosh, what do I do? What can I do? And then they just get frustrated or angry or, you know, feel out of control and have these funny coping mechanisms that come into play. But it's really about, okay, just pick one thing you can be for and one thing you can do as a human being. And if you focus on that, now you have something to drive your energy towards. It doesn't, you know, it takes you out of that helplessness state. Yeah. And that's the only way real change happens, I think.
I do agree with you. And it's funny because like I said, you know, it was a week of, I knew I wanted to say something, you know, to my community about the, you know, as at the time we're recording this, it's in the heat of the moment, right? It's very fresh. And I couldn't hear beyond my own ego, you know, and my own conflict within. Right. And so I think the beautiful part of that is though, and I'm willing to pause. I don't want to come from reaction.
Good for you. I think that is beautiful.
And then I wanted to throw up when I finally put the video out, but it was beautiful because it also showed me what I was actually more afraid of, what was really the conflict inside and the wounds that I haven't fully healed. And yet, you know, and it's just, it was awesome to be able to see all of it. And I'm with you. I think, I love that. It's like against the problem, but for the solution. And that's what I heard is like this, me not speaking about what you want me to speak about is not my consent. It's that I want to be for something else. I want to stand for something. And that is love and peace and understanding of self and others, and bringing the vibration of the planet up, right? Like absolutely. Out of the lower vibrational, egoic, subconscious behaviors. Absolutely. And so it's like, how do I do that? And what do I say to that? What do I speak to that? And then that started to resonate with me because I wasn't resonating with all of the other things.
So you waited until you found what really good for you. I think that's powerful.
I'm still waiting at moments.
And no, but that's good. But I think that's when, you know, I think everybody has a place in the message they bring, right? And so for some people, it might be to like, you know, raise awareness in a different way. For some people, you know, there is a space for people to stand up and fight the fight originally, because that can be a catalyst for other things. But I think it's so important that people tune into like their individual message and what that is for them as a human being, because that's going to be the message that reaches your audience and your people and has the most impact for like your space. And so it's the right thing to do. It's the powerful thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not here to, it was interesting to watch. Like I said, it triggered a lot of that verbal abuse conversation for
Yes.
me. For
Yeah.
me, I'm not pointing. There's no fingers to point. I was just like
Yeah.
feeling
No,
it,
yeah.
and and I also saw how, it was almost like some of the commentary was like they didn't want to be judged, and yet their comment was a judgment in itself. And I was like, wow, how do we break that cycle? How do
Oh
we
my
break
gosh.
that? And I love, I actually said, okay, I think I need to go read and remember, and judgment is a trigger for me right now.
Yeah.
And my fear, and how do I transcend that fear? And I don't know if you've read Gabby Bernstein's Judgment Detox.
I've heard, I like her work. I haven't read it, but I've heard her, I watched a video about her talking about the book.
Yeah, I'm like, here's a plug for you, Gabby. I'm like, I mean, just a place for people to go. I'm like, there's like, what's part of the solution? and for
Absolutely.
me, and everyone has to find their own, is
What
really owning the spaces we judge ourselves. And then, like you said, then we go to drink the wine, and then we judge ourselves again, and then we drink the wine again.
Absolutely. There's something I share with people sometimes, and it's like, if somebody comes up, if I were to come up to you and I'm like, you're a purple monster.
Right.
It doesn't matter how many times I say to you that you're a purple monster, you're not really going to be affected, because there's no part of you that believes that about yourself.
100%.
And so it's always like the places that we are holding on to something really deeply subconsciously or even unconsciously, that we're so afraid of judgment. And it's, and I think everything in our world is, as, maybe extreme as this is to say, I think everything in our world is showing parts of us to ourselves. Everything we react to, everything that triggers us, everything that feels really good or really bad, like anything in polarities especially. And so all of those things become those opportunities to go inwards. And for judgment, for me, I found that a huge thing was, the more, I guess it was more like in terms of judging others, but I find in general, intentional understanding, like trying to just remember that everybody has different programs and needs and beliefs and expectations, like intentional understanding was the only thing that could produce compassion instead of judgment.
Yeah.
And so the fear, like even if people are attacking or judging, and it can be so friggin' scary to put stuff on social media that's like opinionated or political or like anything, right? Because we can't predict how people are going to react, but it's like always that reminder that, okay, people are in this space, and if they're judging or if they're rude or they're angry, they're coming from their own place of pain and unhealed unconsciousness. 100%. And like always practicing the depersonalizing of it is so helpful.
Yeah, I love that, depersonalizing. 100%. I do know that, and it's like, even though I know that consciously, my ego, right?
The subconscious
takes over. But it's just, I think it's always just coming back to center.
Yeah.
Like that has been my journey, like it's like knowing and trusting what you know to be true for yourself. Especially as you raise your consciousness and you clean out a lot of the subconscious. And what's true for me here and where I am in the ascension of my consciousness that I've accomplished, I'm clearly not finished, but it's like that's not maybe where someone else is, and they need to see something in their world in order to make that ascension happen. Absolutely. And I think that's what I think is beautiful about your story, is that you had to see it. And I always say, who you be is what you see, right? So our beingness is where we are, it's just where we are in our growth. And it's sometimes, I know it's the hardest thing, especially when it's really close to home and you're in your house with people that are not at the same pace. But I think it's also the human experience, right? Absolutely. Or experiment. Maybe it's a human experiment, actually. So.
Absolutely.
Oh, amazing. I could go on and on. Maybe we need to have you back. I love this conversation.
Thank you.
We clearly have a lot in common, and I'm just glad you're another light in the world, shedding goodness and trying to help people understand themselves even more.
Thank you. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your like absolute vulnerability. I think that like it's just such a thing, and I won't go on this for too long, but I just noticed there's so many people out there who are teachers or leaders or role models, and they have this sort of state of like, oh, I'm ascended, or I'm perfect, or I'm like done. It's just good luck with that one. Even if we think that, like, there's been times where I've done a lot of work and I'm like, oh, I think I'm like in a pretty healed space, and then the new thing comes along, and like there will always be challenges. And I just think it's such a powerful message to give to people that you're spreading. And I think that is just in and of itself, just, you know, pure authenticity. And I think
I
it's
appreciate it.
wonderful. So
And I
thank you
do.
for
I
the work that you
appreciate
do.
that. Yeah, I receive that, and thank you. And I receive you, so I appreciate it so much. Yeah,
Thank you. And
beautiful.
likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, what is the best way for people to connect with you? Like, how can they? Yes, please.
Yeah, so I would say personaldevelopmentschool.com,
Got it.
and we have free literature, we have free ebooks in there if you go to the resource library, and lots of information on there if you're interested in learning
Amazing.
more.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to check it out myself. So just to our like-mindedness, you know, and keep
Yes.
growing. So thank you so much. And
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. One final question. I always like to wrap it with a bow. Is if this was your very last interview, if this was your last speech, talk, like no one's going to hear anything more from you,
Yeah.
what would you want to leave with the world?
Oh, I would want to leave with the world, and it might sound sort of cliche a little bit, but I would want to leave with the world. One of the most important things you can ever do for your own healing and your own journey is to become a parent that you wish you had to yourself,
Yeah.
and treat yourself with compassion and gentleness in the journey. Because if you are beating yourself up and putting yourself down and being tough on yourself and all those things that human beings do, it only stunts your growth and takes you way back. And I think people, you know, you and I can sort of relate to this, at least in our conditioning, is like, I have to be perfect at personal growth. I have to, you know, be in
Right.
control of everything. I have to, you know, and it's like, until you let that go, which is so common for people, it's so easy to get trapped or stuck. So a really powerful thing is gentleness and self-compassion.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that we're like leaving that note at the end, because, and it's, I mean, it just occurred for me in my life in just a few moments ago, meaning it's like, you know, let alone do I expect myself to be conscious and aware, and yet I'm still the human experience of my ego and subconscious. And yet other people that know that this is what I do for a living expect a lot of me as well.
Yes.
And I speak a lot to the attachment detachment process, and I know you have like the attachment theory or what have you. We'll have to share notes, but I'm like, we must detach from expectation. That is an attachment.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, especially in ourselves and especially in our own
Absolutely.
story. So yes, thank you for that final note. That was beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
so much for having me. It's been a blessing to be here today with you.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, everyone. Please, if you got value out of this, share it, speak to it, share us feedback, give us reviews, whatever it is in your heart to share with us. And absolutely from this day forward, get your brave on and stay strong. Talk to you soon.